Alright, boys and girls, today we went on our field trip to the planetarium and we did some more learning about what we've already looked into for the Great Space Race. And this was one of the gentlemen that we talked about today. He lived a long time ago, over 2,000 years ago. Who can tell me who this is?
Aristotle.
Correct. That's Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was a great thinker of his time, and he would look up the stars, and he thought about what and how things worked up there, and he came up with an idea after studying and researching the best he could, because back in his time they didn't even have telescopes. So he came up with an idea after watching the stars that everything in the sky revolved around the Earth. So all the moons, all the planets, all the stars, all revolved around the Earth, and the Earth is the center of the universe. Now, many years go by, and then somebody else comes along, and they're thinking about what he said, and this guy came around and agreed with him and said, you know what, I agree with you. I made the same observations, I believe the same things. Who can tell me what his name was?
His name was Copernicus.
Not yet. What was his name?
Ptolemy.
Ptolemy. Now, we are going to talk about Copernicus, but before Copernicus was Ptolemy. Ptolemy is that name with a P in front of it that you don't pronounce. Now, Ptolemy came along, and he looked up at the sky and the stars, and he was interested in, figuring out how the world worked, and he came to the same conclusion that the Earth is in the center of the universe. Everything goes around the center, and the Earth is right there. Now, after many years of people believing this, because they all believed this, and these were great people that people respected and listened to, there came a person, and this is somebody also who liked to study the stars in the sky. But when he was doing it, he saw something that made him think, and he came up with a different kind of a thought. Now, you mentioned who just recently?
Aristotle.
And who comes after Aristotle? That's Ptolemy. Now, what was the other name that you said? Because that's where we're at right now.
Copernicus.
You're right. This is Copernicus. Now, Copernicus lived after these two men, and he came around, and he looked up the sky, and he came up with a different conclusion, and that was this. He believed that the sun was the center of the universe, and that everything revolved around the sun. Now, back in the time of these great men, did they have a telescope?
Not yet.
Not yet. You're right. Now, could you imagine looking up into the sky without a telescope? How hard it must be to figure out where all these planets are. But these men right here, they were able to see what they could to figure out as much as they did. Now, how do you think people felt when here, after thousands years of people believing that the Earth is the center of the universe, he comes around and he says, the sun is the center of the universe? How do you think people received that?
They probably didn't like it too much because they believed that method for a really long time, like 2,000 years. And so they probably just said, that's wrong, this is right, because they actually had like fake proof, kind of.
Well, that proof, you said proof. So how's he going to prove that these guys are wrong and he's right? He really didn't have a lot of proof. He just had a lot of ideas. Well, that leads us to our next guy here. Now, this guy right here, I know you're dying to tell me because you like this guy. You know his name. What's his name?
Galileo.
Right, his name's Galileo. Now, Galileo comes along, and Galileo, he didn't invent the telescope, but he sure did use it, and he made it even better. Originally, the telescope was invented like a spyglass, so you could see across and see things closer. But he took that idea and he made it even better and pointed it up at the sky, and he could see into the stars. So because he was able to do that, he did some thinking too. He heard about Aristotle's universe with the Earth in the center, and of course he's heard about Ptolemy's thinking where the sun is in the center of the universe. And he used his telescope. Do you know what he figured out? What did he figure out?
That the sun is in the center of the universe.
Now, how do you think people thought about him telling everybody, hey, the sun's in the center of the universe, everybody? Aristotle was wrong. How do you think people thought about that? What was their thinking? It was surprising that somebody's coming up with something else. How do you think the people reacted?
They might have been like, they would be like, oh, you're a bad person.
Okay, so you don't believe what the rest of us believe, so we don't really like the way you're thinking. And matter of fact, you're right. They didn't. And he ended up spending a lot of time on house arrest, where he was like in his house like it was a jail cell. But you know what? He had that telescope. So when he had that telescope, what would you do if you had a telescope and you had a different idea? What would you do?
I would show everybody what really is the truth, because I actually do have some proof of which is right.
Sure, you'd jump up and down, probably throw some star parties and have people come over and see for themselves. Well, he still did that, but they weren't ready to let go of those beliefs. But eventually, we did come to know that the sun is in the center of the universe, for our universe at least. So, as you can see here, starting with Aristotle and going all through these men, there were two different ideas. Now, the idea that is Aristotle's idea, what do we call that model? That model is called what kind of a model? It's a geocentric model. So if you believe that the Earth was in the center of our universe here, it's a geocentric model. So these two men, Aristotle and who is this? Ptolemy, believed that in the geocentric model. So if this is a geocentric model, what about down here for Copernicus and Galileo? What did we call their model?
The heliocentric model.
The heliocentric model. So these two men believed in the heliocentric model. Now those are questions that you are going to have to answer. They're going to be on a lot of tests this year and for years to come. So it's going to be real important that you know these four men, you know what their contributions were, and that you know some things about them that we talked about today. So make sure to watch this video again if you need to remember those things, and keep on your toes. You never know when you'll get a question about it.